Today, we're talking about the best baseball slang terms. Let's do it. Welcome to Big League Dreaming, the podcast, a show about fulfilling your dreams and taking it to the next level. I'm Ty, and I'm joined here along with my two brothers and my dad. I'm the middle son. And yeah, we're going to talk about some of the best baseball slang terms. I'm going to kick this thing off. I know this is going to be a fun one for us because there's just a ton of fun slang in baseball, a ton of odd things that go on in the game, a lot of dugout talk, a lot of banter. So I'm excited for this podcast. I hope you all are too. I'm going to kick this thing off and ramble off some of my favorite, or some that I think are the best. One you got to put on the list, Bush League. I mean, that is one of the top ones, I would say. Bush League, when someone's being like cheap, or just like, I don't know, if someone's got a no-hitter going and you try to lay a bunt down in the ninth for a base hit, like that's Bush League. That was always one of my favorite ones. Another one of my favorite ones is Louisiana Bayou, when you just throw one right by the batter with a fastball and people in the dugout yell, Bayou, Louisiana, or how'd you like the trip to Louisiana? I always loved that one. A couple other ones like cheese or ched or cheddar for someone that's throwing fast, heat, someone that's got a fast fastball. Another one I liked was the dark one. I don't know if anyone remembers that one, but sometimes people would say, throw him the dark one, which is like usually like an off-speed pitch or something kind of with a lot of movement that strikes people out a lot. So I always liked that one. I thought it was funny because they called it the dark one because it was tough to see. Couple more I got pimped it, or some people say pimp job, and that's when I guess it doesn't have to be a home run, but usually it's a home run and you do a big celebration or a bat flip, or you kind of just swag it out. I guess you could too on a walk-off single or something, just kind of flip the bat, pimp job, pimped it. And then for the home runs, I always thought there was funny nicknames for home runs. A couple that come to mind are going yard referring to the ballpark, and ya. I always liked ya. That was always a good one. And then I got one more, and then I'll pass it on to you guys because there's a ton of them we could go over, and I don't want to have the whole list. So last one on my list is can of corn. Can of corn, we all know that's a classic one. Just like an easy pop fly, can of corn, like just you camp under it. It's just super easy to catch. And so there's a few of my favorite baseball slang terms. I'm going to pass it on to Dad. And before you do your list, Dad, how about you tell everyone a little history lesson? Where does can of corn come from?
Somehow I knew you'd ask me for a little baseball history, Ty. Now, this is a great topic, baseball slang terms, words that you've been hearing your whole life, right, about baseball, and really not knowing the origins. I thought I would look up some of my favorites as well. Ty, I do like Bush League, which kind of makes sense. It has a long history of Bush League. When baseball in the early days, they would go out and search out some of these games, and they would play teams from the sticks, from the farms. They'd consider them in the Bush Leagues. But yeah, that's a great. I love Bush. Bush is probably my favorite term because you can use it in so many different things. But you asked me about can of corn. I'll tell you about can of corn, and then I'll tell you about another one of my favorite baseball phrases, because there's so many, right? There's just so many of them, and I'm really anxious to hear what Zach and Zane are going to pick. But can of corn, all right, let's start there. Obviously, everyone knows can of corn is kind of a way to describe a high, easy-to-catch fly ball hit to the outfield. Well, this is kind of interesting. The phrase is said to have originated in the 19th century and relates to an old-time grocer's method of getting canned goods down from a high shelf. So, think of it as the old days when these grocers would be around. They had to stack things up on the shelves. The cans would be up high. They would use a stick with a little hook on the end, and a grocer would kind of would tip a can. I would say they would tip a can so it would fall from an easy catch into their apron. So one theory for the use of corn as the canned good in the phrase a can of corn is that a can of corn was considered like the easiest catch, as corn was the best-selling vegetable in the store. So it was always heavily stocked and it was always available. It was an easy catch. Another theory refers to the fact that corn, in the very early days of baseball, was played in the outfield, and sometimes outfields were actually cornfields. So if the ball was hitting the fly ball, it would be hit to the cornfield. It was a can of corn. That kind of makes the most sense. Now these, famous baseball announcers like Red Barber and Phil Rizzuto, Kent Harrelson, the Hawk, they use these phrases to kind of enhance the popularity of a can of corn over the history of baseball. Now, one of my favorite baseball terms is a bullpen, right? And I think everyone knows what a bullpen is. I mean, it is simply where where they go to pitchers go to warm up. Well, it was doing a little history, and this is really, there's a good article on MLB.com that talks about the history of some of these phrases. And some of them can be attributed, they know where they came from. Some of them people are just guessing of how they were made up. But I love the history of the bullpen because it doesn't have a clear-cut answer of where this phrase came from. Now, one reference is to the pen where rodeo bulls were held before being released into the ring. That makes a lot of sense, right? All these bulls are in a pen, the bullpen. They're ready to be released. Come into the game as a pitcher, you're in the bullpen. Also, another theory is that, like in the 19th century holding cells that police used, right? They were called bullpens because of by the bullish features of these police officers. They were in the bullpen, and they would be in there as getting ready to be released out into the public to protect the public. Now, legendary Giants announcer John Miller once claimed that it originated in the Polo Grounds where relief pitchers warmed up near a stockade just behind the left field fence. That's interesting. But probably the most famous one, and the one I think that I tend to agree with, came from Casey Stengel. Yeah, that Casey Stengel. He has got kind of the best anecdote of all time. He suggested that it was actually managers who came up with the term. They were tired of listening to relievers, quote unquote, shoot the bull in the dugout. The theory went that skippers decided to send them off beyond the outfield fence where they couldn't be a distraction. We know, I think those of you that have played the game at a higher level, when there is an actual bullpen, college level, those relievers get sent out far away and the shenanigans ensue. I think some of the best baseball stories I've heard come from those relievers who have nothing better to do but sit there and come up with little games to play. I'm sure Zane and Zach have a lot to talk about this because I know both of them ended up relievers. Zach a little later in his baseball career in college, he was a reliever, and Zane was a closer almost from day one at his college. So I'm sure they have a lot of bullpen stories, but I can't wait to hear from them about some of their favorite baseball terms. All right, let's go to Zach. You're up next, buddy. Tell us your favorite baseball terms and why.
Thanks, Dad. That was really good. Man, Ty, you know how to set Dad up. You pretty much put that on a tee for him. Get him going with the, talking historical stories and whatnot. That was great. He loves that. Dad, I like the bullpen term. Definitely have a lot of memories being in the bullpen, even though I was a starter for my first few years. But, when I wasn't starting, I was in the bullpen on my off days. A lot of memories of early on in the season, being down Florida trip or going down to Tennessee or Kentucky in college baseball for the weekend or whatever. Just a lot more laid back. You're finally outside. You're in the sun. Everything feels good. Early on in the season, everyone's kind of happy to get out. It's not like the must-win games of the conference season later on when it's cold and things like that. So playing Destination or the number game or 21 questions, all that, a lot of fun memories. Ty, I definitely had Bush League written down on my list. You said I wrote down Yabo, kind of like the same thing, just unloading on a home run. And I also think of yard card, like a guy, in the bullpen, we would throw out a yard card if we think a guy would hit a home run that at bat, you get one per game kind of thing, having fun with that. I was thinking more slang rather than baseball terms. I'm sure there's a lot of terms that aren't common knowledge to the average person, like choke up or batter's eye or framing pitches. Like the average person is not going to really know that unless they are a baseball fan or know baseball. But I was thinking of like slang. I was thinking like pitching backwards. So like starting off hitters with off speed rather than, fastball, finishing them off with the fastball, throwing the off speed early in the counts, which is what I like to do as a pitcher myself. Painting the black, so throwing pitches on the corner. If you look at a play, the very edge of the play is a black line. So painting the corners black is a term. One term that we use a lot at the Charlotte Knights, or you hear it a lot, is cup of coffee. So when a guy gets called up, somebody gets hurt at the major league level or whatever it is, somebody goes down and they need to send a guy up from AAA, and he just goes up to the major leagues for a day, a few days, and then goes right back down to AAA. He got a little cup of coffee in the minors, or in the majors, sorry. But even if it's a September call-up, like he was up with the Major League Club that last month of the season, he got a cup of coffee in the majors. It's a very common term in the baseball world. And then one last one that I thought of that's kind of like maybe a newer term, I would think, is dude. So guys will use the term now, I guess more like scouts, coaches, evaluators, things like that. They'll say that guy's a dude if he has like projectability to be a prospect or like a big time, like a draft guy or like best player on a team kind of thing. Like you want to have like at least one or two dudes on your college team. Basically, if you call a guy, oh, that guy's not a dude yet, or now he is a dude, or oh, he could be a dude down the road kind of thing. I've heard them say that term on MLB Network one time. It made me laugh because I was like, man, they know dude? I don't know. Something that I've definitely heard more recently rather than when I was in college necessarily. But those are some fun baseball slang. There's tons more. Could probably do this all day. But I'm interested to see what Zane's got for his slang.
So for mine, I'm not going to give, too much of a history lesson like Dad. But as good as his were, I just don't think I could do it the same justice. I'm just going to rattle some off. But actually, Dad, since you mentioned bullpen, what I tell our guys, our relievers, that why they call it a bullpen, actually, it might not be safe to say on the podcast, but actually just go look up the difference between a bull and a steer. That's why I tell our guys it's called a bullpen. All right, so everyone's got some homework now. But some slang that I like in the game, I'm probably the most around it right now as far as like around players and interacting with them. So some of my favorite are more on the pitching side, like stuff you would say, like pitchers would say. Like the first one that came to my mind was sword. Like you get a guy to make an ugly swing, immediately yell sword. Right now we're doing live ABs, getting ready for our season. So like anytime one of our pitchers makes a hitter look ugly, like immediately guys are yelling sword. I think about that Benchwarmers, the movie where he like chops at it and he's like, "Hey," and he's like, "Don't chop at it. It's not a sword. You're not a sword." Ty can plug in that sound bite if he wants, or maybe that's a copyright thing. I don't know. But a couple others I like are ketchup mustard. You blow a fastball by a guy and ketchup mustard. That's a good one. I think Ty said bayou, but another one similar to that is kind of like the Oklahoma Sooner later. Like same thing, blow a fastball by a guy, he's super late, sooner, later. There's a lot of good ones out there. Some ones that the guys say, like that I've heard that I've kind of been like, where do you even get that? Is like if I've seen like a pitch run up and in on a hitter and guys are yelling hot soup. maybe because, like, it's by your lips and you, like, blow it like it's hot soup. So, like, I had never heard that, but I've heard our guys say it a bunch. Or if a pitcher keeps throwing balls up in the zone, like he's missing way high, they say get him a bucket, he's throwing up. Wow, now that I think about it, a lot of mine are kind of trash talk. But it's all fun. I mean, that's kind of the way the game's trending a little bit right now. It's just a lot of fun. And let's see, I think I had a couple others. I can't really remember them off the top of my head. I didn't make a list like you guys, but this was a good topic. I thought it was a lot of fun to kind of throw those like little sayings out there that people don't really hear, that, you know, baseball players say amongst each other. But overall, I really like this topic. Of course, Dad had to bring in a good history lesson to tie it all together.
You can follow us on TikTok at Big League Dreaming. You can also follow us on Twitter at BLDpod. That's at BLDPOD. We're also on YouTube at Big League Dreaming the Podcast, or shoot us an email, bigleaguedreaming@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And leave a comment on this podcast. Leave a review. Let us know what would be your walkout song.